What is up, fantasy fans? Welcome back to The Data Straight, a channel dedicated to translating real-world data into actionable insight that you can use to improve your fantasy lineups. My name is Reese, a very warm welcome to you, and in today's video, I'm going to spend a few minutes walking you through what I'm thinking going into Spa, and specifically, I want to talk to you about a big change I'm making to my lineup, and why I think you might also want to consider making this change before the teams are locked in ahead of qualifying. Before we get into the video, I just want to remind everyone that I am not in any way affiliated with the Formula One brand or the company Play On that sponsors the game. I'm just a fan of the sport, a fan of the game, and I'm out here making videos on YouTube because I really love talking about this stuff and I want to build a community of other like-minded people to share this with here on YouTube. So with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, let me start out by just recapping what happened at Spa last year, and for anyone that has managed to block it out of their memory, maybe skip ahead 30 seconds so you don't have to relive the pain. The track at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps is 7 kilometers long and there are 44 scheduled laps, which means going into the race last year, we were expecting to see 308 kilometers of high-speed racing. On the day, the best Michael Massey was able to offer us was a 14-kilometer procession conducted by Bert Mailander and his bright red Mercedes AMG GTR safety car. It was a very controversial race because after completing just 5% of the laps, the race director decided that was sufficient to award 50% of the points. At the time, I remember feeling really bad for George because all the controversy over the race kind of overshadowed George's outstanding quali lap, which resulted in the Williams qualifying P2. But then after what happened at the end of last season, it kind of takes an effort now to remember that there was any controversy surrounding Spa. Looking at the weather reports, we're currently expecting clouds with sunny intervals, and crucially at this point in time, the chance of precipitation is in the low single-digit percentages. So at this point, it's not looking like we're in for a repeat of 2021 in 2022. Although, it would be great for me if George qualified in P2 again, because I'm actually planning to make some changes to my lineup, and if George manages to put his car on the front row this weekend, I'll pull a K-Mag and smash every door in sight in celebration. Okay, let me start off by showing you my lineup from Hungary. So I ran with Leclerc as my turbo driver, which kind of scuppered my plans for dominating my league because I didn't realise that Ferrari used a magic 8-ball to work out their tyre strategies. I then had Perez in my number 2 slot, which is fine. P4 for the Mexican is an okay result. Unless something bad happens to Max, when you'll then want Sergio to win, most weeks you just want Sergio to get a podium. 4th is still okay. After Sergio, I had Lando, who finished P7, which is good. I could have had Fernando, who finished P6, but I went with Lando, and I don't regret it because P7 and 16 points is great. Fernando was the better pick. That's fine. What really let me down in Hungary was my second row. My second row scored a whopping -2 points. I spent 15.6 million of my budget on -2 points. Even Mazepin scored more than -2 points most weekends last year, so I would have literally been better off with Mazepin than I was with Valtteri and K-Mag. I'm not bitter, but honestly, it's been 4 weeks and I'm still not quite over it. Okay, for Spa, let me talk you through the changes I'm making because I'm making 3 changes and one of them is a bit of a risk. First, Kevin is coming out and Mick is going in. For anyone that missed my video on Tuesday, I talked about the run of form Mick is currently on in some detail, so check that out. But in summary, Mick has been the most cost-effective driver in 4 of the last 6 races. And I just feel like Mick is in beast mode at the moment as he tries to secure his future as an F1 driver. So Kevin out, Mick in. That's easy. This uses up an extra 0.2 million in budget, but for me, that's not an issue because I've got 6.9 million spare going into Spa. Bottas is currently staying put, but to tell you the truth, I don't feel great about including him in the team at the moment. I can swap him out, but I really want to make 2 other changes, and I don't think the person I would swap him out for is going to score 10 points more than him this weekend. If I was making the trade, I would swap him out for Lance, but I ran the numbers comparing their weekly scores, and Lance has only outscored Valtteri by 10 or more points on 3 occasions so far this season. So, if I made the trade, I've only got a 23% chance of it paying off, and I don't feel good about the odds of Lance making up the penalty points I would have to take in order to make a 4th transfer. Okay, after Valtteri, I spent a lot of time going over this in my mind because I really want to bring as much coverage from the top teams as I can into the final 9 races. So next, I'm actually swapping out my constructor. I'm switching from Red Bull, who I've been with week in, week out since Australia. I'm swapping them out for Mercedes. Currently sitting P2 in the Fantasy Constructors Championship and currently on a streak of 3 wins out of the last 3 races. I want to bring some Mercedes representation into the team because with Leclerc and Sergio staying put for now, I have Ferrari and I have Red Bull, but I don't have any Mercedes. As I did point out in my video on Tuesday, Mercedes have not finished bottom of the table in any single week so far this season, and they've not had the dreaded double DNF. But I'm seeing reports that they are running with a retro livery this weekend, and the last time they did that was Hockenheim 2019, and we all know what happened there, so I might live to regret this one. The problem I have is I can't afford to bring George in. I would love to run with Leclerc, Sergio and George as my front row, but in order to do that, I would need to sell Red Bull and put Ferrari in, and then that only leaves me with 9 million for my final driver, which means I would then be forced to swap out Bottas, and then, although I'm taking the penalty I mentioned earlier, I would be 0.1 million short of being able to afford Lance. So Albon is the next best driver I can afford, and Albon has only outscored Valtteri by 10 points on 1 occasion, so I'd feel even worse about making that decision. In order to avoid taking the penalty, I'm swapping Red Bull out and putting Mercedes in, but I'm then having to take Lando out because I'm only left with 14.9 million and Lando costs 15.9 million. At this point, I'm looking towards Alpine for my final driver. So, as I said on Tuesday, there's not much separating the Alpine drivers. However, Fernando was on a dynamite run of form going into the mid-season break, scoring 123 points in the last 6 races, which meant Fernando's weekly average of 20.5 points is way above his teammate Esteban's, which is 78 points and a 13-point average from the same races. This means Lando is out and Fernando is in. I will just say there is an obvious risk here. Of course, Fernando has announced he will be leaving Alpine at the end of the season, and there is this little voice in my head that's saying, in a scenario where Fernando and Esteban are going head to head, Fernando will be told to back out and let Esteban through. But Fernando's a wily cat, and I think the old maestro might have a trick or two up his sleeve, so I'm sticking with the streak and bringing Fernando and by extension Alpine into the team. I feel good about my spread. I'm a little worried about not having Red Bull because having Red Bull has been my way of ensuring that I have Max in my team indirectly because he's too expensive for my configuration, even though he is the 6th most cost-effective pick this season. But I really do think that Mercedes is the team to have this weekend. That's what the data is telling me, and if I truly believe that, I need to accept the price of that conviction is no Max, directly or in my case, indirectly within the team. A quick note on some other drivers I had my eye on. Based on their current form, Carlos is a really good pick. If I had a 4th substitution, I might swap Sergio out and put Carlos in. But as I also pointed out in my video on Tuesday, it's a dangerous game to play because of how consistently opposite these two drivers' scores are. I do think there is a strong case for having Esteban over Fernando, so anyone that says I'm going with Esteban because I'm confident that Alpine will give team orders that disadvantage Fernando, I wouldn't disagree with that position, but I'm going with Fernando because I think with 0 pressure on him, it's equally likely that he refuses to listen to team orders and does whatever he wants to do anyway. I think Lance is a great pick, and if I could, I would swap Valtteri out for Lance. But as I said earlier, the only way that substitution pays is if Lance outscores Valtteri by 10 or more points because of the penalty I would incur. He's only managed to do that on 3 occasions so far this season, so I don't like my odds. I did go back and forth in my mind on swapping K-Mag out for Albon instead of Mick, but in the end I opted to go with what the data says is the most cost-effective driver, because for me, these final 9 races are less about scoring huge points and instead just bringing home the championship, because I am currently top of my league with a 72-point margin, so I don't need to take any big risks now. I just need to manage the tyres and bring it home, and that's what I think my team will do this week. In terms of drivers I would suggest avoiding, I will quickly jump to the Fantasy Championship and we'll just spend a minute looking at the bottom of the table. Yuki is currently rock bottom, and at 8.4 million, his weekly average of just 2.8 points is not a good pick. I'd suggest passing on Yuki and Guan Yu Zhou. Latifi is an interesting one. I wouldn't say anyone that is putting Latifi into their team is wrong, but I think if you've got the extra 0.3 million, just play it safe and go with Albon. Daniel is an interesting one because we have of course now had the confirmation that he will be leaving McLaren at the end of the season. So does that mean we're about to see 9 races where the Honey Badger really shows us why Formula 1 would be less interesting without him? Or are we about to listen to the singleless B-side of his worst album to date? I am hopeful that at some point between now and the end of the season, we will see Daniel on the podium one last time here in the Fantasy Championship, or more likely in the points per million rankings, but I'm not holding my breath. Jumping into the points per million rankings, I did consider bringing Lewis into my team, but for me, it's too early to say how the Mercedes dynamic will play out over the course of the final 9 races. And with Lewis's price tag and him currently only being the 15th best pick, I feel more confident going with Mercedes as a constructor rather than either of their drivers. George is currently sitting P8 in the table though, and if we look at the chart, you can see he was P4 at one point. So again, anyone that has George in their team is making a good decision in my opinion. I just think Mercedes as a constructor is safer. I will say this, there are reports of lots of drivers possibly taking engine penalties this weekend. I'm actually recording this video a day early because I'm at a wedding this weekend, so I won't have access to my computer to record until after quali, and I want to post these videos before quali. But I will say this, I'm not locking in my team just yet, just in case we do receive confirmation that a certain driver is taking a grid penalty. If that news breaks, you best believe I'll be logging in on my phone and making changes as the bride walks down the aisle. And that does it for this video. Good luck to everyone for this weekend. Thank you for taking 10 minutes out of your Saturday morning to listen to me talk about my team. I really appreciate your time. I hope you have a great day ahead, and I'll see you again very soon.